Okay, Zakia, whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, I'm super excited to be here, of course. And like she just mentioned, today is all about the interview, virtual interviews specifically. And we may even touch on a couple tips and tricks that can be transferable to an in-person interview. So without further ado, let's kick it off to the next slide. Okay, so if you're thinking about any opportunity, whether it's a job or an internship, and you know that you are preparing for an interview, what should you do? And depending on your expertise with this, experience, this could be a very scary process. So don't worry, it doesn't have to be. We have some tips and tricks that could be helpful for you. So things you should do before the virtual interview. These things include, but is not limited to, first and foremost, take personal inventory. And by that, we mean prepare all of your credentials, making sure that you have your resume up to date, making sure that you know what your skills are, your values, different interests that you're looking to get into, whether that the organization currently has, or maybe ideas that you may have that could be addition to what you'll be doing in that role you're applying for. Of course, knowing your own strengths and areas of opportunity. I never like to call them weaknesses because we're not perfect, we're imperfect humans. So let's just use them as opportunities to grow and to excel in ourselves, personally and professionally. Of course, answering questions is the best way to do that. But as you think about the personal inventory that you currently have, you can do that in a couple different ways. You can just think of a way to tell your story. Think of a way to kind of organize your thoughts and be able to present your experiences to the organization based on what they're asking. The second thing you can do that's going to be most impactful for you is just understanding the organization you're applying for. So your research is going to be critical, so that way you can A, stand out a little bit and distinguish yourself amongst others, but also two, understand that this organization may or may not align with your values, your mission, and current things that you really want to go after. So regardless if the interview is in person or if it's virtual, this is a dual process, right? The same way the company is interviewing you, you get an opportunity to interview the company. So just make sure that it really does align with who you are and what you're looking for in your life. Places you can go to research the company could be found anywhere. Really, the internet is a plethora of resources. But a couple that could be helpful, Glassdoor, absolutely, LinkedIn, Vault, and just other news sources. You could even just go to the company's webpage and look to see what are some things they have going on currently or initiatives that just passed. Familiarizing yourself can absolutely distinguish you from other candidates. And if you wanted to pop a couple of those fun facts in the conversation during the interview, it wouldn't hurt as well. Also, utilizing your network. You may actually know people that work for the organization in which you desire to work for as well. If that's the case, ask them about it. Ask them why they like working there, or maybe some fun facts about the company. This could also be another way to show that you've done your homework and can distinguish you from other candidates.
Okay, so during the virtual interview, there are certain ways to answer questions. So when answering questions, you want to listen carefully to the interviewer and ask for clarification when necessary. It's not a bad thing to show that you need a minute to think about your answer, because it shows that you're being thoughtful and you actually aren't answering with like memorized answers. You want to show that like you're in the moment, you're really listening to what they're saying, and you're taking the time to really clarify if you need to. Staying honest and genuine in your responses without reciting memorized answers. So the interviewer can see through your energy. They can see if you're being genuine and if you really are actually thinking about what you're saying. So I've done it myself in the past where I had to ask, it was a long question with a couple of different points in there that I needed to address. And I remember just saying, oh, can you please repeat that? And can I have a moment to think about this? Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I did end up getting that job. So know that memorization is not the way to go. They want to see that you're genuine. Don't be afraid of silence. If you need to take a minute to stay silent and process your answer and process the question, again, it shows thoughtfulness. Don't be defensive when asked difficult questions. So they might put you on the spot. Sometimes there are trends now where they'll ask you a question that throws you off just to see. They're called stress questions, just to see how you deal with stress in the moment, you know, because any job is going to have some kind of stressful component to it. So really, it might not even matter what the answer is so much as how you handle that moment. So make sure, you know, you take a minute, think about it, and just be genuine in your answer, and don't speak negatively about other people or companies. So this is really important too, because they might ask why you left your previous job, or a question about how you dealt with conflict in your previous employment. Anything like that, you want to be really careful how you answer the question, where you're still describing the conflict, but you're not speaking badly about your supervisor, your coworkers, or the company that you worked for.
Okay, so these are just a few. So for those that may not know who I am, again, I am a campus recruiter. So I interview, without exaggerating, thousands of students every single year. And today I decided to not just go over some of the general questions that you may be familiar with, but kind of some of those tougher ones on purpose, because I want you to be equipped. I want you to feel confident as you're going into these interviews and kind of have an idea of how you can answer them. So just a couple of ideas. Try to avoid rambling, right? Tangents or not answering the question. Be a little more concise with your responses if you can, especially if you have a limited amount of time. Make sure that you're specific, to make sure to detail certain things if you can, certain dates, timeframes. Paint the picture, of course, for the interviewer about what you're trying to say. And of course, we mentioned earlier, there's going to be some questions that are purposefully trying to throw you off. So I listed a couple here that may be interesting. Some you may have seen before. Others are worded specifically in a way to get you to think a little bit deeper. So for example, one of my favorites is, describe a time when you were asked to perform a task or spearhead an initiative that went against your values. What did you do? What was the outcome, right? Now, of course, this is probably not a traditional question you've ever been asked before, and that's on purpose. It's really to dive into your values. And depending on what you say, depending on how you handle it, of course, it can say a lot about you. It can say a lot about your personality, what you actually value. And of course, listening in as an interviewer, I'm looking to see, does your personal values match the company's values? And if not, I may even dig deeper into say, well, what is it about this role or our firm that you find exciting? Or what do you value and why do you want to work with us? Especially if they're in complete contradiction of one another. So this is why your research of the company and understanding who you are can be really important. Other things that kind of touch on what you may already be practicing or what you've already considered or thought about when it comes to interviewing are time management, right? Tell me about how you prioritize work or projects. Even now, more than ever during this pandemic, how have you balanced out school and other obligations, studying virtually, or maybe preparing to be back in person at UCLA next week? So these are ways, of course, to really think about what you're doing. I also like to throw in a couple of fun things, kind of like that last question. Like, if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? And maybe even why? I also like to throw in some other things that could be more technical or more geared toward what you're going for. So just in short, think about your story and really hone in on your mission, your values, so that way, no matter what question you're presented with, similar to some of these ones listed, you know how to answer them concisely, really show your personality and what you can offer to that company.
So there's a specific method on how you can answer questions, specifically behavioral questions during the interview, that will really give the right amount of information and context to the interviewer. It's called the CAR method. And so it will allow you to formulate a thorough and concise response that will fully address the question and, most importantly, demonstrate how the example is relevant to the position that you're interviewing for. So the CAR method stands for context, action, result, and relate. So context is essentially when they ask you about a time when you experience either conflict or something along those lines, where they say, please describe a time when you had X, Y, and Z. So what you want to do is stick to this formula. What was the context of the situation? You want to give them a little bit of background on what the situation was without getting into too much detail, without giving any negative information about your team or your company. Just really kind of talking about the challenge that happened in your previous position and who was involved. And then you would talk about the action that you took to address the situation, and explain your thought process behind it, because they really want to get to know you and how you handle certain situations. So explaining what you thought in that moment and what action you took to help solve that situation. Then you talk about the results. So based on your action, what happened? What did you accomplish? And if not, if you didn't accomplish something positive, what did you learn from that situation? It's okay if it didn't end like perfectly well. What matters is what your thought process was, why you did what you did, and then what you learned from the situation. And then at the end, you kind of want to relate that skill or that action or that situation to the position that you're applying to, so that you can help them connect the dots too. So if you kind of learned a lesson from that experience, you can say, now I know for future situations in this position, I can do it differently from the lesson that I learned.
I'll jump in here a little bit and just give a tip. For questions like this, and even this method in general, it's really the interviewer's way of asking you or looking to see if you can take personal accountability. Specifically, a lot of students go into examples about group projects or group activities, which is totally great and actually a good way to describe this and to go through this 4-step process. But make sure you highlight your personal accountability. What did you really do? How did you really grow and learn and even take responsibility for some of the things that may not have been going well in that situation? It really shows your personal growth, responsibility, and the way that you react to some of these stress factors. So in your research, preparing questions to ask can be critical. Remember, interviewing is a two-way street. It's not just the interviewer who has all the power and control. You too can prepare some open-ended or thoughtful questions about various things that you want to know to help you decide if you even want to move forward in that process. So a couple of things that you might want to avoid just for professionalism's sake. Try not to ask any personal questions about that person's salary or personal issues. That, of course, can be off topic, touchy, and just not the professional way to handle things. Things that I encourage you to think about is asking about the company culture, asking about the organization's management style, or who you may be working with closely, like a mentor or a supervisor. Maybe even asking how that person got into that position, what they like about the organization. This can all be really helpful in helping you assess, again, the company's values, mission, and how your day-to-day activities may look in that program or in that role for you to decide if you even want to take action in moving forward. Something else that isn't listed here, but I've personally encountered and I think could be helpful, is just doing your research on the interviewee, or the interviewer rather. This could be a good opportunity for you to understand a little bit more about their personality, and perhaps it may surprise you that they have also too walked a similar journey. So how fun could that be as an icebreaker to talk about a specific sport that you guys like that's the same, or maybe there's an alumni group or something that you have in common. It could be a nice way just to be human beings and get to know that person as well. So just a couple tips that you could try if that's something that makes you nervous to break the ice, if you're still nervous about interviews, or if you just need some way to connect with the interviewer in a little more personal way instead of just all business. So some tips and tricks about after the interview. What should you do? And maybe even the time frame of when you should do it. Anywhere between, I would say, the moment it ends up to about 3 business days after, you can absolutely send a thank you note. This could be in many forms, whether it's an email, through a LinkedIn message, but just a way to say, I appreciate you for taking the time. These can go a long way, because you'd be surprised how many students don't do that or don't take the extra step. It could also leave a lasting impression depending on what you put in there about what you discussed, what you took away from that conversation. And again, it gives you an opportunity to ask any follow-up questions and really solidify the things you're excited about in that opportunity. You could even mention things that have come up after for you. So maybe you were able to connect with someone and you thought about some other things and it just got you excited. Share that. This is really just another way to leave a lasting impression or even clarify things that you didn't get to say during the interview. And again, as someone who does this all the time, it makes a difference. I remember those students that go above and beyond to connect with my colleagues on their own, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or even just make a lasting impact or an impression to send a very thoughtful thank you email to every single person they talk to in our process. So I encourage you, if you really want an opportunity, whether an internship or a job, to take these extra steps. Even though it's time consuming, it can really help your chances. Something else is just to practice. Interviewing can be hard. It's kind of like the equivalent of public speaking. Either you completely dread it and get sweaty, or you become an expert at it because over time, you've just done it over and over again. So this is no different. Practice, practice, practice as often as you can with various people. So of course, there is some virtual streaming accesses that you can get through Handshake and some resources there. The Career Center, of course, an amazing resource, but don't feel limited just to that. You can also talk to friends, do practice things with family members, and really just practice in the mirror with yourself, quite frankly. Another thing you can do is record yourself, right? If you watch other people on YouTube or you record yourself, some of your answers, and you watch it back, you may notice, oh, wow, maybe I say a lot or okay a lot. You may notice other things that allows you to correct things and come off the way you want to. That's the best way to say it. And again, this is a learning process. So don't think that you're going to be an expert the first time or even the second time. It may take you a few tries before you feel comfortable, and there's nothing wrong with that. The goal is just to practice until you feel comfortable. And of course, you can always schedule an appointment with a career advisor to get some feedback as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Zakia, and everyone for joining us. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording so we can have time to do question and answers and everyone can feel comfortable. This is not gonna be recorded or uploaded to YouTube, your question and answer portion. So we can go ahead and enter a discussion and really think of questions for Zakia here, you guys. Think of questions for myself as well. We have kind of different approaches because our backgrounds are different as far as professionally. So we're happy to answer any questions you have. So give me one moment. Let me stop